And I can briefly introduce Emily. We have known each other for quite some time, all the way back from the University of Washington. And then later, when Emily was completing her Master's of Fine Arts at Brooklyn College, we spent some time together in New York, and I've had a lot of fun and enthusiasm watching her art practice grow and develop. And she, as you'll see, includes all sorts of media themes that I'm going to let her go into more about the things that she's working on at the moment. Uh, but yeah, Emily, I will let you take over. Let me know if you're able to share your screen, as I know you have a presentation, and I'm going to turn off my video so that everybody can spotlight and see you and your work today. So thank you, Emily, for joining everybody. Emily Schleiner.
Thank you, Donald. Yeah, hi there. Thanks for coming, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, my name is Emily Schleiner, and um, I am going to just take you on a tour of some of my artwork, especially more recent works. Um, Before I jump into the recent works, I did want to mention my past, which includes a lot of ephemeral performance art. So you can see me in a picture here. I'm hitting a piñata, and what I used to do is take artwork, make artwork, take it to a public place, do some kind of performance with it, and then have documentation done, and then basically take it away again. Um, And then, in those kind of situations, a lot of times the documentation becomes the focus. But of course, I was more interested in the magic of the moment. And then I also was working with technology fairly regularly, sometimes in performance settings, sometimes in making installations, and um, also video sculpture, essentially. So you can see that on the right side, there's a video sculpture. That particular one is has a quote from a physicist, and then because of the nature of the quote, the um, the words are being projected all around in like a specific way. I won't go into that project, but anyway, that's kind of my past there. And then there was for me a kind of hiatus where I spent a bunch of time learning how to make websites. I was self-teaching, and I did some amount of artwork, but not a lot. And then eventually I went back to school to study computer science. And then I was working full-time as an IT person. Uh, and then something happened around 2019, which was that during my walk to work every day, I got very inspired. I basically was working in a pretty male-dominated environment around that time, and I would get off the bus early and I would just walk. And the the river that I was walking next to is the Sacramento River, and um, yeah, I found it to be like really restorative and empowering, and um, basically a pretty profound good thing every day. I started to take a bunch of pictures of the river, and I ended up with kind of a big collection of them over time. And then I started to try to recreate some of the feelings from the river. So I was um, interested in the flow. And by that, I'm talking about the kind of the flowing of paint here, but kind of trying to capture some of that magic of the river, but also using elements like, the speed of the liquid that's flowing, or obstructing it here and there, and kind of allowing that chaos to happen, but in ways that are a little bit controlled here and there. Here I made some animations for these images. And then I made my biggest piece yet, which this one's 8 feet by 8 feet. So it's a pretty big one. And you can kind of see that there's a river in the middle. This is an actual painting of the river, and it's receding into the background and the banks of the river on either side. And then you can also see that there's a kind of shape, in the middle. We don't know, is it maybe a moon or something? Anyway, I'll come back to that. So yeah, during COVID, I had some thoughts that were interesting around that time. I became focused on mortality. I think a lot of people were at, around then. What if I died suddenly? What have I learned or done right or wrong in my life? And how can I keep growing? Because this is when I had to stop my commute, so I was working remotely, which, for many, that's a privilege, and it was, but it was real an adjustment for me. So I needed some strategies to kind of find new ways to keep moving forward. And one of those was psychotherapy, which will play a role later on in this presentation. And then also I took a class on tarot cards. And that was an interesting creative tool for me. So the tarot cards are essentially divided into 5 sections. They're kind of like playing cards that were created in the Renaissance in Italy, and people they use them for playing cards. Eventually, people started using them for other things like divination and whatever. But yeah, so here they're kind of, you can see them divided into their suits, which is basically, corresponds with regular playing cards, but each suit in a tarot card corresponds with earth, air, fire, water. There's some kind of the focus on human and like, I would say human frailty and wonder, and also for the the major arcana, which are the ones in the middle. Those ones are basically major life events. So a lot of them are judgment, death, the sun, the moon, these things that, they have a kind of powerful meaning for humans. And what I did is I ended up making a series of cards. Oh, I was given an assignment, essentially. My assignment was to create a hero's journey based on the tarot cards. So I did. I essentially went through and I identified the cards that thematically resonated with me as something I recognized in my life in one way or another. And so for this card, I essentially focused in, it's called the High Priestess, and the theme there is wisdom from above. So, and you can see me as a baby in the middle, and then that's with my mother. So my mother was kind of a wise and interesting person, both religious, but interested in science, and kind of showed me many things. This is another one. This one is Death and the Moon. And here, my mother died. She has died. Like when I was 18 years old, she passed away. And that card, death, always sounds very ominous. And it's true that death is very difficult. However, it was also a time of incredible growth and a catalyst. And you can kind of see branches growing out of my head. By the way, these are paintings, but also multimedia collages. So you can kind of understand that process too. Also, there's a moon here. So this is death and the moon. And the moon kind of reveals what was previously hidden. And so you can kind of look into that Roman salt pool on the left, and you maybe see some creatures from like the Lascaux caves or some other kind of mysterious place like that surfacing. This card, Strength, was significant for me. Am I running out of time? No? Okay. So Strength here was reminded me of my journey having learning disabilities. When I went back to school to study computer science as a re-entry student, I discovered that I had learning disabilities and that I could learn a lot more than I thought I could if I had the right tools. And so you can see there's a kind of representation of me scaling a wall with a bunch of tools. And then in the upper right corner is a carving that's actually an ancient carving. I think that's from the Halil River Valley in modern day Iran. Essentially, there's a figure there who's mesmerizing some bighorn sheep or something like that. And that's kind of what I felt I was doing. I was mesmerizing my own inner demons that were getting in my own way as well. And then this last one I'll show you. I won't go through all 10 of them, but this card is the Magician. The Magician is a card that where people start to show their excellence at something. And so working in that field, I started to feel like, okay, I can do this. I'm figuring it out. And I felt, accomplished. And that was a good feeling. So these are just some of the different cards. I basically have shown you the positive ones. There's ones that are not so positive. I just didn't go over them. And then the other thing that I did during COVID was I made an exhibition inside my house. And um, I think it was on Google Maps or some similar service like that. But it's not up anymore. But essentially, I had put up all these photographs of the Sacramento River and some other pieces all around. And eventually I realized that when I took a bath, that the water in our house, because we were living in Davis, California, was coming from the Sacramento River. And so that was kind of a revelation for me because I had been missing the river so much, which had been previously part of my daily ritual. So I made an installation about that and included that in that virtual exhibit. And then um, we moved, and we moved because essentially we were working remotely all the time and not feeling as tied to the area. So we moved to Humboldt County, which is on the north coast of California. And soon after moving there, I did take a trip to essentially what is the source of the Sacramento River. And by source, what I mean is that Mount Shasta, which is one of the big mountains in Northern California, has in its kind of like foothills, there's a spot where a bunch of water kind of comes out of the side of the hillside. And then that little stream or river eventually becomes the Sacramento River. So after moving north, I eventually went to visit that spot, and I felt like, wow, this is amazing. This is not even that far away from where I moved. So then I started to pay attention to kind of like the more regional water systems and the climate that has shaped the area, and trying to sort of connect with it and create a new strategy for how to connect with it. So for one, I just knew I needed to spend more time meditating, and then also to get to know the life forms in the regions, to look at the redwoods more and understand the relationship with fungus. I had a friend who's a mycology expert visit recently and was basically teaching me and my spouse about a lot of things. So anyway, this is the meditation labyrinth here that we have created outside. So that has been a wonderful tool. And then this is the new type of flow painting that's been emerging in the background is Mount Shasta back here, and then you can see the coast, and then the greenery in between, and then the fog that's there. Everything seems to be getting increasingly representational, even realistic in a way that is not really preferred by me, but um, it just kind of happens, I guess. So yeah, and then this one here, Roots, is really experimenting with the idea of trees flowing because they have interesting bark patterns and they and their root systems and then their relationship with mycorrhizal fungus, which extends their root system, is pretty powerful. And yeah. So now I think I'll um, just read a quote that I basically made up because I'm quoting myself here. My feeling about flowing phenomena is that its uniqueness, its ecosystem, regular visitors, seasonal variation, etc., has me experiencing the location as though it is a person. For me, this also means that breathing in or bathing in its water is a profound experience. And I'll kind of leave it at that and see if anyone has any questions for me.
I'm gonna kick it off in terms of questions. I have so many questions, Emily. Um, but I do want to encourage anybody else to either hop in or raise your hand or post a question in the chat. But first of all, Emily, your work is so dense, and I want to say like each project is its own universe. And You went very quickly across what I would expect is something like 15 years of creative production and thinking. I wrote a bunch of notes in here as to where to begin. If one thing that I wanted to hear more about was in the slide that you were showing regarding um, finding flow in your walk to work. Uh, there was two parts to the slide. The left slide, um, I think, was about the river, and then on the right hand side, you'd said something to the effect of your like embracing woman something, and then
Oh, sure,
spirituality.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us more about that. Because I think that it relates maybe to the river. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, right. The walk to
Yes.
work, women embracing spiritual thoughts. Tell
Yes.
me, tell us about that, and if I am correct that this somehow led or intersects with um some of the work that you're doing now, some of the themes, not just about necessarily the flow of the river, which I think is visually evident, but also does that have to do also with the tarot card project
Uh,
and those paintings?
yeah, those are really good questions. Yeah, I would say that I hadn't really um thought that much about the fact that I was a woman with regard to my artwork anyway. Um, Throughout most of my career, it was really more, I was more interested in kind of like, uh, crossing into other fields like physics or, reaching into other things. And then the discovery of the flow situation, it felt like, yeah, actually, there's a lot more I can say about that. Thank you for reminding me. I was gonna say that basically I was going back to school. I had a lot going on. I was very busy. I also was, discovering I had this learning disability and what that meant. And that took a lot of effort, and kind of was like emotionally difficult to deal with. And then around the same time, I also was, like working, I was interning different places. I was like learning where I preferred to work professionally as a person working in with technology. And uh, I think maybe you could say I was kind of like radicalized in some ways by working in really male dominated environments with a bunch of um I mean, I don't think people have bad intentions in any way, shape, or form, and I don't have resentments or anything, but there's just like a cultural dynamic that can be very challenging to deal with. And so when I felt like I needed to double down and dig um into myself and the world and like find ways to get support from community and connect with things that were rejuvenating to me spiritually, that uplifted me, things like that. I really felt like I needed to carve out time. And so I did, and that walk with the river was really a big part of that. And I think also the other thing was that um in retrospect, I actually am aware of a health problem that I've had for years that I didn't really realize that I had, which is that, and I'll tell you guys because I'm not private about it, but essentially I have something called endometriosis, which is basically you get your female reproductive parts try to like grow together with uh your other body parts, which is extremely painful. And so throughout this time, I also had, physical ailments as well. And so I think being able to um, kind of embrace myself physically and emotionally meant that I was encouraging myself as a woman to be strong and be around the right people, be in the right situations that would really empower me. So I really felt like I benefited from creating a practice around that, and that the art practice was also a spiritual practice as well. And it was not like that for me before that time. Before that time, it was a much more intellectual practice. It was gratifying and satisfying and meant a lot to me, but it wasn't spiritual. So that was like a big shift. That was different. Uh, yeah. And also these types of paintings with the flowing, I mean, I couldn't help but think about menstrual blood. I couldn't help it. So it just it all kind of was flowing together, I guess.
Yeah, I when I saw those flowing paintings that you first showed after talking about the river, and the paint looks like colors you would see in a river, and then also there's this kind of liquid characteristic that wet paint has, but not always dry paint, and you really captured that. Um, But then I also saw that same technique, that same painting technique in the trees and the roots and these later paintings that you showed. And it it really it looks appropriate there, right? It looks like you looked at that flowing paint and you said, that's exactly how roots look like. And even trees, even though you're representing two totally different things, one being kind of the river surface in the earlier paintings with the flow, and then later the trees, we're talking liquid and solids, but that same technique fits for both of them. My question that I think you might not want to talk about, but you posed this in such a way that I'm uh, I'm unable to fight my temptation to ask you about it. But you'd said that your work is increasingly representational, which you're not necessarily, what was the word that you used, happy about or intended to, what do you mean by that? What is there? What is
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So I think like, this one here is just more abstract looking. People can try to read more into it if they want, but and then this one is kind of like, okay, that's definitely symbols. And then and I think I really am interested in the experience of making the work and the kind of like ritual of it and the ability of it to carry forth that chaotic, chaos. I guess like the magic of chaos to me, of where you put it down on the painting, and maybe you lift up the painting to let the paint go different places, but you just don't really know what's going to happen. It's just really unpredictable, and that's actually really wonderful. And so the more I control it, the more I feel like I'm throttling something. It's kind of like, how do you ever get a thing happen where your internet slows down and you're like, why is this happening? And it turns out that your cable company is throttling your streaming service, and you're like, this is not okay. Like, I'm going to call them. So I feel like I don't want to throttle the chaos, the magic that pours out naturally, in situations where there's things flowing like that.
interesting? Yeah, but I think that although there are these um representational elements that your more recent work has, in contrast to what you showed at the beginning of the slideshow. I'm thinking about the image of the piñata performance that you did in Governor's Island, and then um, the video sculpture piece in the center. Obviously integrating technology and technological elements um, in them. I think the continuity here is that your projects are idea driven. There's always an idea in them, right? Like the fact that you're doing paintings ostensibly like landscape paintings of Mount Shasta are not like it's not like the same motivation of doing landscape paintings that that the Romantics did. It was for you, it's actually this longer dialogue that you have with water, with the movement of water, with this kind of oneness with the water cycle, it being in the bathtub, the drinking water that you have there, your location, maybe might be a stretch to say, but certainly is true that your practice has evolved with the environment that you're living in and making work in, right? So, at the moment you're living, we're seeing Emily in her studio in Arcata, Northern California, which is quite different than the environment of Brooklyn, New York, right? But
Mhm.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that the idea forming and directing the work, um, that's the conceptual element is constant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Donald. Thank you. Yeah. The the I feel like a lot of these are kind of like it's like a portrait of something that I'm feeling with some phenomena, you know? And with especially with the Sacramento River, I really felt like um this flowing river and its kind of magnitude because it's a very big river. It's kind of like the Nile. It floods yearly. There's an enormous amount of wildlife that, lives there and uses the river, and then people love it, like it's an incredible um I don't know, thing, whatever it is. And yeah, I feel like that kind of like central thing is kind of like the presence of the river, whatever it is. And yeah, I think there's been um some experiences that I have that uh they're kind of like, people have their like religious visionary experiences, and I feel like uh in our crazy mixed up world that we live in, there's not a lot of space for that sort of thing unless people, carve out the the opportunity for that kind of interaction. But I um I think I feel like I'm I'm a kind of like a religious person in that regard. Like I'm connecting with these ecological, natural situations, and then I'm sort of like, you know, I guess maybe like channeling some kind of feeling about it, and releasing it from me because otherwise it's kind of like haunting me or something. Uh, so um Yeah, I actually sometimes like I'll make works like this. And actually this work is when we moved, it was so big we could barely get it out of the house. It took a lot of effort. We had to take off a whole big screen door. Anyway, it was a big project. And then what I ended up doing was donating it to a local hospital who then incorporated it into their permanent collection. So it's actually on display, and it really deeply satisfies me because it's basically community art that it gets to be appreciated by people when they go to their doctor at the Sutter Hospital in Davis, California, which is great. But I'm kind of relieved that we don't have it anymore because it's arresting, and I think it's a lot for like a private individual to just hang out with something like that because it's like so bold and I don't know. I just think it's kind of like a crazy powder keg and some visual powder keg. You don't always want to sit right next to it. You know?
You're referring to the painting of the river flowing with the square and the circle in the
Mhm.
background, right? Yeah,
Right, right.
interesting, interesting. Yeah, I
Exactly.
think if I recall correctly, was that the painting that you shared during the pandemic virtual studio visit?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that was great. That was really wonderful because during the pandemic, there was so many days that just kind of blurred all together into each other. It's like, I think we were all on board for a few weeks of lockdown, and then months, years later, it was still the same. And I mean, even today have difficulty recalling when things exactly happened in that period between March 2020 and you know sometime in 2022. But having that studio visit and seeing that painting was great because you shared what you were working on and thinking about with so many people, and you had that syncopation of time that broke us out of the doldrums of staying in pajamas all day and pretending to do remote work. That was great. One I want to I want to ask another question. I think we could squeeze another. Oh, we have one from Christina Ibeck. What do you do to overcome creative challenges or blocks during the process of creating? That's a great question. What do you do to overcome creative challenges or blocks during the process of creating?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I think some of those strategies that I mentioned earlier, um, let's see. Oh, here. Yeah, basically, yeah, psychotherapy. And that's an incredibly powerful tool for me to kind of move past any kind of blockages that come up that feel like they're preventing me from accessing the creative, zone where I feel like I'm creating something meaningful. But also community. This was the other, where was that one? That was back here. Yeah. Yeah. This was so um yeah, so when I mentioned earlier earth-based religion, that's kind of like a code word for all kinds of people that do all kinds of stuff, and that it's kind of like contemporary paganism. Um, but a lot of folks they do all kinds of interesting kind of uh land-based or spiritual or whatever activities. And I think that's a really good way to get out of my head, like because it's really easy to, because, in the process of creating work, we have to consider our audience, and there's a lot of considerations going into it. It's really easy to get locked into a really analytical state of mind. And so I think to break out of that, it's really nice to have some support from people. I think that's just normal. Humans are primates. We need each other. That was the other big takeaway from the pandemic, was that I'm just not going to feel bad that I'm a primate and I need contact with people. And, in order to grow and learn and change, I need support. And that's just people. We all need it, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, you you posed some pretty serious questions on that same slide regarding the strategies of psychotherapy and tarot class. Those questions above, I mean, I think many of us can sympathize since we all lived through that pandemic. But I mean, the first question that you're posing is sort of a question that is fairly commonly asked to people who have by people who have a near death experience, right? Except they don't ask it in the hypothetical, they ask it in the I almost died or I could have died. Um, and then they do a self or an audit on their life. Tell us about that question, how it came to be, and then what concrete, if any, or theoretical spiritual mental changes emerged from that reflection.
Oh, that's a great question. Um, so yeah, that question, would I have regrets if I died suddenly? I think during COVID there was this sense of, if I go out at the wrong place at the wrong time, I could get COVID, I could die, and then, so that sense of mortality and being imminent did kind of light a fire because I had not been showing work for a long time before that. And so I suddenly was like, well, like if I just keeled over, what would I have? What would I want to leave behind? What would I want to, um, is there anything that I'm like, you know, there's a something important that I must do. There's tasks that I have to complete. And I think you know, that idea of thinking of um this kind of phenomena that I'm considering as a presence or something that I want to make a portrait of felt like um, you know, something that I ought to do, you know, like if I just keeled over, I'd be like, oh damn, I was going to do that. So I mean that's kind of a light-hearted way of putting it, but um it just really kind of clarifies one's to-do list to have some imminent things that could happen. So when I started doing these types of works, and then the tarot card pieces, it felt like I was articulating some important themes in my life, you know, like this high priestess idea and you know, death and the moon, and there's something powerful about releasing one's story into the world, like using one's voice in a way without fear, you know, using it to create vision, you know, because sometimes it's hard. The world is scary. There's a lot of things that go wrong, and I think it's really important to allow vision to kind of surface, and then also to articulate the vision, to share it with people, because you know, people can be lost. They need help. Sometimes one person's vision is another person's lifeline, or just, you know, support in the right direction, or just like a minor stepping stone, whatever it is. I feel like we're all participating in a creative conversation, and we help each other by being creative, you know.
Awesome. Emily, as we're coming to sort of the final moments of your Zoom on Art, thank you again. If the students here would like to look at your work more, to think about it, to dig more deeply, where can they find you online, in the internet, in the world, whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I'm going to put my website down. Here, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Yeah, I have a website. I'm on a bunch of social media. I do periodically release new pieces. I've started writing bad poems the past year, which I do. I usually put those out onto social media every um, solstice and equinox. Um, but yeah, essentially, yeah, you can find me there, and I will continue to try to facilitate whatever's going on with me creatively and see where it takes me.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. I appreciate you making time to come and talk to us all, to share your awesome work with us. And um, for everybody who's online, and to you, Emily, this we'll have the video recording posted and shared very soon. So if everybody can give a digital or round of applause to Emily, we'll let her bow and then continue the rest of your day. and you're getting some thanks coming in here. Thank you so much, Emily. Have a great one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, take care.
Bye.